In today's video, we're going to be talking about some of the materials that we will be using as we work along with pastels. Of course, the first thing is going to be pastels themselves. I'm going to tilt my camera down and maybe you can see some of my pastels. These are the pastels that I use here in my home studio. My studio used to be my living room. I'm going to see if I can zoom in. Nope, I can't. Okay. But now it is just used for my artwork. I have a lot of stuff here, and though I try to clean it out, I still have a lot of stuff in here. And so, anyway, it's just the nature of the beast. I'm a art supply hoarder. I can't help it. It's just the way it is. So, anyway, let's talk a little bit about the materials you're going to be using. First of all, as far as pastels are concerned, if you already have pastels, use them. It doesn't matter if they're a student grade or if they're a super expensive set. It doesn't matter. If they're old, it doesn't matter. They are still going to work just as well as if you bought them yesterday. Use as many different brands as you can get your hands on. When I first started, I started out with a set of Sennelier half sticks. The reason, my logic behind that was I'd been using pastel pencils, but I wanted to go to the full sticks. The full sticks are about that long, and they're expensive. The half sticks are about that long. It's about maybe 2 inches, maybe, excuse me, maybe not. Anyway, the half sticks, I get more bang for my buck. So I bought a set of the half stick Senneliers. I think, I'm trying to remember if it was a set of 80 or 40 or something like that. There were a lot. So probably an 80 set. The thing I liked about that was that not only was there a lot of different colors, there was also a lot of different values. And in one of my lessons, we're going to talk about value and why that is so important. So don't get enticed by all the pretty colors, because colors are one thing and we can do a lot with them, but value is super important, more so than all those colors. And by value, what I'm talking about is a wide range of colors and values that go from white all the way down to black. So it's a lightness scale, I guess. Anyway, so when you're buying pastels, that's what to look for. I do recommend buying a set of half sticks, as expensive as you can afford. Don't break the bank. But of course, the more colors you have, the more the chances are you're going to have the color you want. Otherwise, you're going to be blending color on the paper, which is part of the nature of pastel anyway. And that's fine. Sometimes it's kind of frustrating, though, when you don't have the exact color you want. And unfortunately, we can't share like I would do it in a class face-to-face. So you're going to just deal with what you have. And I'm sure your work will be beautiful. But if you need to go out and buy pastels, that's how I would do it. On the other hand, if you have pastels, just consider purchasing color as you need it. I wouldn't, at this point, I mean, I have a ton of pastels. I have pastels that I have never touched. And in fact, I may be selling some of them because there's just too many. I probably will never use them all in my lifetime. But what I tend to do now is I look for colors that I think I'm going to use. And I might buy half a dozen sticks at a time. A brand that I particularly like is called, it's made by Mount Vision, and that is my favorite. But anyway, that's not what I want to get into right now. The pastels are really important, of course, but I want to talk to you about more of the other things that we're going to need. First of all, we're going to assume that you have some sort of tape, or excuse me, paper to do your work on. What I tend to do is I tend to tape it to a board. You can buy pastel paper that is already mounted to boards, or you might know somebody who can mount a piece of paper to a board for you, and that's great. I don't do that. I produce a lot of paintings, and not all of them are really show-worthy or even sales-worthy. They are just not good paintings, and I'm okay with saying that. So I try to keep things simple. So I usually will use just a sheet of paper, pastel paper though, and I will tape it to, number one, a piece of foam core. This is just a cheap piece of foam core. You can see it's already been used several times. Or I might use a piece of masonite. Now, you can use hardboard. Well, this is considered to be hardboard. You can use cardboard, but what you don't want is corrugated cardboard because the little, I don't know, whatever they use to make it corrugated are going to show up in your work. You know, as you apply pastel, that's going to transfer to it. So I try to suggest that you avoid cardboard. But just about anything else is okay. You can use plexiglass. Don't use glass. It's way too. I think that would be hard to work with. But you know, if you're in your own home and you're not going anywhere, then you can use glass if you wanted to. When I tape it down, I just use plain old masking tape, cheap. This is from Ollie's masking tape, and I will tape it down not just on the corners. I tape it all the way around, because if you tape it on the corners, inevitably those parts that are not taped down are going to curl. So tape it all the way around. Save yourself the aggravation of having to fight with that. Let's see. What else can I tell you? You don't need to tape down a whole lot of the painting. Or piece of paper. I usually do about a quarter of an inch, maybe at the very most. And when I go to frame something, that edge will be hidden. So I wouldn't go any larger than a quarter of an inch, taping that down around the edges. Okay. Whenever I go to start a painting, I try to protect my skin because pastel is very drying, and the paper is rough. The papers that I use anyway are pretty rough, and they can really raise havoc on my hands. But also another thing to consider is that pastel uses the same pigments that you would find in oils, in watercolor, and acrylics. They are pure pigment, sticks of pure pigment. Pastels are sticks of pure pigment with a small amount of binder. The cheaper ones are going to have more binder, but basically they're all sticks of pigment. And some pigments, I believe, are probably toxic. And there have been research done on this, and I have not seen anything yet that conclusively says whether or not the stuff is going to hurt you or not. So, nevertheless, I'm going to assume that it may be toxic. So to protect my hands and to prevent stuff from getting into my skin, I use something called gloves in a bottle. There are others out there. One is called Art Guard. I believe Avon made what they call it, silicone glove. And what I'll do is I'll just take like a pea-sized drop of this stuff and apply it to my fingertips. Now this is a small bottle. There you go. That's about as much as I use. And I'll just rub it into my fingertips because my fingertips are the only parts of me that are going to come in contact with this pigment. Unless I get really messy. Try not to get it on anything else. So once it's all rubbed in, it'll dry and you won't even know you have it on. The beauty of this stuff is it makes cleanup so much easier. You know, I used to just always look like I'd been digging in the dirt because my fingertips were always a mess. But the gloves in the bottle does help make cleanup a lot better and more thorough. All right, so I've got my paper taped to my board. I got my gloves in the bottle. I'm ready to go. Well, I decide I want to do an underpainting. What am I going to use? I could use water. I prefer to use cheap rubbing alcohol, isopropyl alcohol. Now, somebody had told me that due to COVID, this is hard to come by. So I could be wrong. I don't know if it is or not. But if you can get your hands on some cheap alcohol, this is 50%. So this is half water basically and half alcohol. You know, grab a bottle of it. It's great for doing an underpainting. The thing that makes it great is that it evaporates and dries quickly. Don't get 90% or 99% or even 70% because it's going to dry too fast. This stuff is really, this for me anyway, works the best. I used to get it at the dollar store for $1. I think this one came from Walmart, so don't spend a lot of money on it. It is just, you know, it's just something to play around with, but you don't need to spend a lot of money on it. Okay, so I would use that. If I were going to do an underpainting, I would pour a small amount into a little plastic cup or dish of some sort, and I would apply it to whatever pastel I already put on the paper with a brush. This is a very cheap brush made by Crayola. You've probably heard of that. Crayola. And this little brush does a wonderful job of applying the alcohol to an area to liquefy the pastel. And I will do a whole class about doing underpaintings because I just think it's that much fun. So here's a little bit of information. Okay, so now I've started to work and I'm done with the color. What am I going to do with it? Am I going to throw it back in this big box full of pastels? Oh, no, 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 because I will never find it again. Or it'll take me too much time. So instead, I'll take the pastel that I've just used and I'll put it into a separate dish. That way I can get to it again very easily because inevitably I will need it again. That's just the way it goes. And the ones I've used will be in this little dish and very easy to get to quickly. Quickly is my middle name here. I have a technique that I use occasionally called dusting, in which case I would use a palette knife to scrape off some of the pastel dust onto my painting, and then I would use the palette knife to kind of squish and crush those little bits of pastel into almost like into a dust onto the paper surface. It creates a very diffused and lovely effect, sort of like wildflowers off in the distance or something like that. But it's a great technique to use. A lot of times when I'm getting ready to work on a painting, I will do a little thumbnail sketch, which is just a little teeny tiny sketch on just a sheet of paper, notebook, whatever you happen to have. And by doing so, it helps me to figure out my values and placement of my objects. It's not a biggie, you know. In fact, at this point, I don't do it very often. I just kind of intuitively just go for it once I see something I want to work on. But I like to have just plain old pencil. I also use this plain old pencil to sign my work with. And, you know, I've seen where other artists will use like a pastel pencil. I mean, you can use anything really. But for me, just a plain old pencil works just fine. This is something called artist tape. I know it looks like the masking tape, but it's not. It is supposed to be, and I don't know if it is, it's supposed to be acid free. And so if you're working with a painting and you're trying to frame it or do anything with it, you can use something like this so it won't eat up your paper. So just a little tidbit of information. I had mentioned in another video pumice gel. This is something that I use occasionally when I want to create my own surface. This is made by the Golden Company. And this is also another kind of a ground, acrylic ground for pastel, again made by the Golden Company. It's a fun surface to work around and play on. Now, when I'm working, I tend to be a plein air artist. I work outdoors for the most part, not all the time. But one of my key things is value. Value meaning a scale of lightness to darkness. Sometimes it's hard to see what thing is darker than another. So I made this little thing, and it's really just a little piece of red mylar inside of a baseball card holder. And this would be a little viewfinder I would use to look through to see what is darker, one object or another. And it does a great job. It takes the color right out and it does a wonderful job there. Another thing that I use quite often is something called glassine. This came off the package. I buy it in rolls, and because they're in rolls, I can put them, they come just as the roll though, wrapped up in plastic. I put them into a plastic wrap box or aluminum foil box, and that way I can pull out as much as I want and I protect it at the same time. So that's kind of a handy tip. I wish I had thought of it, but I didn't. And the other thing, this is clear mylar. It's actually called Duralar, is the manufacturer's name is Duralar. And what I will do is if I'm done with a painting and I want to package it for sale, but I don't want to frame it, I would put a sheet of this over the painting to protect the surface of it. But the fact that it's so clear makes it so that the prospective customer can still see the painting very well. The glassine which I talked about just a minute ago in the rolls, I would cover a painting. I can cover it with this also. If it were a painting I wanted to go back to, this will protect the surface of the pastel. It's a very smooth surface. It generally does not pick up much pastel when it's on the surface, and it doesn't hold a static charge. So again, that also will make sure that none of the pastel is lifted off onto the glassine. But it's a great tool to use to protect your paintings before you actually frame them. So those are a lot of the tools that I use and the materials. So I just want to kind of give you an overview of what is involved here. You don't actually have to have any of these things generally, other than tape and something to work on, a surface to work on. But they will make your life easier if you happen to have them. If you don't, then you kind of just muddle through and you'll be fine. All right, thank you, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.